Hey, Speed Demons, and welcome to the American Downhiller podcast presented by skiracing.com, where we share our insights and stories on the best sport in the world, World Cup Downhill, and the legendary tracks that we run this winter. Because this week is all tech on the Men's World Cup, we're going to dig deep into a few topics and answer a few questions from the listeners. Hey, remember, if you have a question for us, email them to info@americandownhiller.com. In this episode, number 7, we are going to cover pre-race routines and how to dial yours in, when to get to the start, what are the things you do for your equipment, your mind, your body, and what do you do that last 30 seconds before you run. We'll also cover training run stories. Darren, Marco, and AJ and I have done a million training runs, and things kind of go crazy sometimes during training runs. And we'll also cover a few listener questions. Hey, everybody, I'm Doug Lewis, two-time Olympic downhiller, and although I never won a World Cup, I was second by 4 hundies. Yes, hundies matter, Darren. I did win a couple of training runs that felt really good, but didn't get me a trophy. Hey, joining me are 3 of the fastest American downhillers in our history. AJ Kitt, 4-time Olympian and had 95 World Cup starts, but only 1 in a slalom. That's a smart downhiller. Next up, Darren Rawls, winner of 12 World Cups, and he left the World Cup starting gate 218 times, not one of them a slalom. And finally, the founder of the American Downhillers, Marco Sullivan, a 4-time Olympian who had 167 World Cup starts and a record of 105 of them were in the downhill. So as you can imagine, after hearing the amount of starts we collectively have, we know a thing or two about start routines and their importance. Let me start out with a quick question to everybody on here. Did you ever miss a start for any reason, and was it a World Cup? For me, I never missed a World Cup start, but as a U16, I was so super late to a start in Killington. My number was 3 away. I was still on the chairlift. I actually jumped off the chairlift, skated the start, went into the start, and was able to run. Not recommended, but I did do that. Anybody else miss a World Cup or miss a start that they want to share?
For me, it was tight. I had a lot of tight calls, close calls, and I had to get on the I was on the gondola in Kitzbühel one year, and you kind of get wrapped up in trying to stay away from the whole crowd, and then things are tough. I mean, you can't get through places too easy because of all the fans. But I was getting fully dressed on the Gandhi, bib on, suited up, ready to go, so I could just roll in the start. And I was panicking a little more than I should have. I still had about 15 minutes before I went, but in my mind, I was going to miss it. I didn't want that to happen.
For me, the only start I missed, I was about 13 years old. It was a powder day at Kirkwood, California.
Of course, Marco.
I was out with my buddy Prado, ripping pow, and I showed up at the start, and my coach was just standing there all pissed because the race was like over. And I learned my lesson that day. Never miss a start again.
I don't think I ever missed a start, at least that I can remember, but I got to tell you, it's my recurring nightmare that I still have to this day. That whole stress, like you're talking about, Darren, of I forgot my bib, or I can't find my skis, or I'm late for the start. You know what I mean? It's just that nightmare. And I mean, I'm glad it never really happened, but man, it happens to me recurring right now as an adult.
Yeah, I still have those dreams too. It's crazy.
Me too. The ultimate stress dream.
For sure, I still have that dream where I'm late and I don't have my skis or whatever. It's crazy. Oh my God. Well, we all talked about timing, and I'm going to break out first thing about start routine. I was one of those who knew the length of the chairlift, length of the pommel lift, how to get to the start. So I totally remember Kitzbühel was when I ran it, it was a tram that didn't fit 223. So they limited the amount of people. So you had to put your skis sideways in the tram. So I had to deal with the timing of that. I knew that in Val Gardena, the finish line was 5 miles from our hotel. So I would take a bus to our hotel, then go out the Hotel Lauren, and then ride up. So every one of the World Cup starts, I knew exactly the chairlift times, the routine that I needed to have so I could arrive at the starting gate 15 to 20 minutes. That was my 15 to 20 minutes. But timing is critical, and you can practice this as a junior racer too. Like you're at Kirkwood or at Pico or wherever you are, learn those times that you need to know so you can get to the start perfectly, so you're not freaking out like the rest of us have. All right, so let's, we've got the timing. We just discussed that. Let's talk about equipment. Equipment has to be ready at the start. I'm going to throw this to Darren. Darren, when you got to the start, what did you do for yourself or with your rep to make sure your equipment was ready and you felt comfortable?
Well, early on, before I had a ski tech that took care of all that stuff, you know, even like this last week, Marco and I were at Ajax Cup and bringing skis up to the start. But the first thing I'd really pay attention to is just making sure there's no ice on the sidewalls. I was pretty anal about my stuff. Like I wanted my skis super clean, no snow on the top sheet, sidewalls, make sure the edges were clean. I mean, obviously after they come with the ski bench, I've like buffed out the sidewalls. There's no wax on the edges. And then I'd separate them up, you know, take the straps off and make sure that the bases are clean. But the ski techs, like you'll see them brushing those skis out. When you come from a warm ski room into the cold, it actually helps like push out, you know, close the pores of the skis. So there's some wax left over no matter how much you brush. So you see these guys brushing quite a bit at the start to try and get that last little bit of, you know, a cleaned out structure. And then it was, you know, just taking a rag and wiping the skis down the sidewalls, like even right before we kicked out the start, just making sure there's nothing on the ski that's going to like potentially cause any drag. And then with boots, you know, I made sure my buckles and all the screws and rivets around the ankles were like tight. Like that was kind of the night before I would do that. Just make sure everything was like tight and snug, so I didn't have like, you know, power strap like coming off or a buckle getting loose. That's just an extra distraction you don't need to have either, you know, as far as putting yourself in panic mode, like those dreams that we just talked about, you know. So making sure your equipment's dialed. I mean, I'd even polish up my helmet the night before, you know, with a rag, make it all clean, you know, just buff it out. Like everything was like cleaned up and ready to go fast.
Nothing specific for me, but like Darren said, just you wanted to be in that start or show up at the start with as little worries as possible. So having all that stuff dialed in.
I'm probably the polar opposite of Darren because, you know, that was just one thing that I didn't have any talent for. I mean, yeah, I wanted my equipment all dialed in and I wanted everything perfect, but I also wasn't the one doing it, right? I had a service tech that I let do all that stuff because that was his job and his area of expertise. And I didn't want to get in the way, basically is how I felt. So I made sure that, you know, my stuff was dialed and I showed up at the start ready to roll. But you know, other than that, like with the skis for sure, I just raced on what they put on my feet.
I think one thing that, I mean, for us, we're taking care of, we have factory techs, all these kids out there, like take your skis up and like, you know, pay attention to what's going on. They'll just leave them stuffed in snow and have like ice chunks, you know, or snow in the bindings. And, you know, I was like really kind of like conscious about trying to keep my bindings clean. And I would even clean my boots, the toes and the heels off before I'd even walk over to get, you know, my tech to put me in. But just like make it easy on your tech or make it easy on your coach, getting you in your skis, you know, and don't show up with like ice jammed up in your bindings or whatever. But I want to touch on one thing, a story in Aspen. You know, we were just there, Marco and I were just there ripping around and got the top of Aztec, actually FaceTime AJ, which is awesome, you know, just checking in because he owned that place. But I remember his tech, Eddie Wahlberger, which is mine as well, like a few years later, he had 3 pairs of downhill skis at the start of AJ's, and he would like put them on his feet and he would tuck down the side of the race hill and go up that top lift. And I went up because I was forerunning. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm just trying to find the race keeper today. Mm-hmm. So he would actually, I mean, leading up to like, you know, half an hour before the start, he would put them on his feet and he'd feel what he liked best. And it actually worked pretty good, huh? AJ, no one could touch you up there, but it was impressive to me that his ski tech was actually skiing on his skis and just like deciding which pair to pull out, you know, for that race. And I mean, yeah, just rocket ships.
Isn't it interesting? I just remember putting on my skis, and if they were super fast in the start, my rep would like, oh my God, we hit the wax. Of course, if they were just sticky, they're like, oh, that's perfect because you're going to break. They just twisted around no matter what your skis felt like. It was so perfect.
It's so true. Like, what are you going to do about it at that point?
Yeah.
Especially if you're the wax guy. He's like, yeah, I nailed the wax before the race for sure.
They're sticking right now, but they're going to break for you. Just got to put the athlete in a good frame of mind and
He's going to push really hard out of the start and it'll be great.
All right. So equipment's taken care of. So important to take that worry out of your mind, whether you are doing it or whether your coach or your rep is doing it. Let's move to the mind. AJ, if your equipment was set or being taken care of, how did you get your mind in the right mental space to fly out of the start of Kitzbühel?
Yeah, I mean, I approached the whole mental side of the thing with a lot of focus. I really felt like, if my mind wasn't totally right, it was going to affect everything, right? It was going to affect my physical. I'd be stressed and tight. And if I changed my approach to how I was going to attack the course, it would, the equipment wouldn't work the way, it was dialed to or whatever. So, my most important thing for me was to be able to stay relaxed, be able to manage my heart rate. And, so I wanted to be at the start plenty early, and I didn't care if I was hanging out for 15 or 20 minutes or even a half an hour before I kicked into my routine. But, if I took the moment I kicked out of the starting gate, backed up like 20 minutes, that's when I started everything. Right. So I had a little physical routine where I'd get my blood pumping, get my body warm, stretch out, get my body feeling really good. And then I would just start to dial in with my head and start to focus on what's my approach to the, to the first section of the course. I want to get into a good rhythm on the run. Are there any tricky spots that I want to really focus on? And sometimes I'd even run through one whole run of the course one last time, start to finish. But then after that, I wanted to kind of really shut all that stuff out and not overthink it. I didn't want to overanalyze the course. I really wanted to have my mind be really free. So as soon as I felt really confident in my approach and my plan, then I kind of stopped thinking about the race itself, and I really just focused my mind on my body. And there's some relaxation techniques that we learned, and that I think every athlete will learn at some point in their career, to be able to have your mind control your body, really focus in on every piece of your athletic ability, and control your heart rate. And right before I went out of the starting gate, as we ramped up from 5 minutes to 3 minutes to go and all that kind of stuff, I tried to get really fired up, get really almost jittery. But then with 30 seconds left to go, I brought my breathing down and tried to get my heart rate down to where I felt it was below like 120 beats per minute. I wanted to really relax and really get calm. And then with like 15 seconds to go, it was go time. And I got really fired up again. So I wanted to be able to explode out of the starting gate from a really calm place, but then ramp everything up and be really ready to fire like a rocket taking off the launch pad.
AJ, I'll throw this one out and I'll throw it to all three of you. What happens with the delay? What happens if something happens to break up that routine? How are you able to manage that hiccup or that bump in the road mentally?
Well, for me, this is the hardest thing. I mean, I remember I got iced in Garmisch one year. I was in the starting gate. Two of the three racers ahead of me had crashed in the same exact spot, and the guy on course ahead of me had taken out a bunch of netting. And it was really cold that day, and you guys know what Garmisch is like anyway. So it's like, okay, out of the skis, leave the skis laying there, get out of the bindings, get a cape on. You got to just completely re-gear your mind from I'm ready to go right now to I'm going to back up to a point in my routine, but you don't know how far to back up, right? Because they're only going to give you like a 2-minute warning when they're ready to resume racing. So you've got to like figure out how to get from, that part of your routine to that 2-minute pre-race thing in like a moment's notice. So those are really tough. I mean, at that point, it's just about staying warm and you're kind of in idle, right? You got to throw the transmission into neutral, idle the motor at like 1500 RPMs for who knows how long. And then, you got to be able to throw it into gear and crank it out again. So those are definitely really tough. I can't say that I had one that I can remember, but I can't remember many more. And those are experiences you just don't want to have. But you got to be ready for it.
I think just putting yourself in your own place, right? Getting away from that situation. I always, a number of times too, just maybe it's just in the start or a couple of guys out and there's a long hold and you're kind of ramping up, building up like AJ was talking about, Marco's going to talk about physically getting ready and mentally getting ready. You kind of like everything it comes together for one moment, you know, and timing is critical. And sometimes you have to completely shut that off and like restart. And those are tough, but I think it's good practice to, you know, just stuff you got to deal with. So you got to know how to do that. And I'd walk away from the start. I want to kind of get out of my skis. I had a long hold in Borneo one year, and I just completely kind of like checked out and said, hey, you know, to Huey, our start guy, just like, come get me like 15 minutes out. I want to be out of the scene. You know, I don't want to keep like keeping this mind kind of buzzing. I need to drop out of it, and then I'll come back in and just, you know, restart.
I like AJ's analogy of putting it in idle when you have a long hold. You know, you're staying present in your mind, but you might need to just chill out and not get too overamped. And like you said, you might only have 2 minutes to really get back in that routine once they hit the play button again. So I think it comes with experience. You know, it comes with just being confident and knowing that that's not going to ruin your day. If you do get ice like that, you can bounce back from it, and it happens to the best of us for sure. Just got to overcome it.
Yeah, this is what I tell the young skiers I coach is, you know, if you get iced in the start or if there's something going on crazy, remember that you're in control. Darren talked about getting his skis off and going to take that time. AJ said getting out. They're not going to start the race without you. Make sure that you know that you have some control over the start, and don't be bullied into a stressful situation. And I think that's really important to know that you're in control. So we've talked about the equipment, we've talked about the mind. Sully, and I'll throw this one your way. What was your body warm-up routine, and when did that start as far as back from the start?
Yeah, for me, it was so important to be feeling good physically kicking out of the start, or even throughout the whole day leading up to the race, which basically started in the morning with like a little morning warm-up routine. Especially as I got further into my career, I would, before I even went to breakfast, I'd get out of bed, do a little stretching, a little core, just get the body firing. I know a lot of young athletes probably don't need that because you're bouncing off the walls anyway. But you know, getting up, making sure your body's in a good place, having a good breakfast. You know, some guys were so nervous they couldn't even eat breakfast, which was fine, you know. But I was one who, I like to have a pretty big breakfast actually, so I'd have fuel throughout the day. But whatever suits your own needs. And once you get out on the hill, I always like to get a free run in before inspection and find a nice run, rip some arcs, just make sure you're feeling good on your skis. And if you're not, you might have to, you know, stop on the hill and stretch out, or just identify anything that's you feel like is a weakness. Because going back to that end goal is when you're kicking out of the start gate, you don't want to have any worries. You want your body to be feeling good. So taking care of that as you lead up to the inspection, and then when you actually show up at the start, I always like to feel like I was really physically warm. You know, no I guess as you get older, it's like aches and pains, but when you're a kid, it's just maybe you're nervous or it's a cold day or whatever. So having a set start routine of getting out of your skis, maybe running around, you know, maybe you're wrestling with your teammates or something. That was one thing I thought some guys used to do, like have full on wrestling matches at the start, and that warms you up like crazy, you know.
Just as long as you don't like pack your goggles full of snow. See these kids doing that. It's like, what are you thinking, guys? Come on. Oh, I can't see now. Oh, it's snow in my goggles. Like,
enjoy that.
Come on, you know, use your brain a little bit.
Totally. But just making sure whatever it takes to get warm. And then for me, that came before going into the mental routine that AJ was talking about. You know, once your body's ready to go, then you start dialing in your mind to really get focused. Then that last 5-10 minutes is very personal, I think, but it's worth having a routine each time to make sure that you're fired up and ready to go.
Even like US ski team at that level, you know, we're at Beaver Creek and we were testing lactates and heart rates and all that, and found out that when you fully max out for even just a small duration of time, your body is awake and ready to perform. If you go in kind of cold and not completely like just hitting that like maximum level, you can't perform that well. I mean, I think when you go up and train, you'll notice that your second or third training run, say in a GS day or slalom day, is probably better because you've already sort of like hit that maximum level. You have to do that before you get in the gate, especially on race day. So you're physically 100% ready to go, which Marco was talking about.
Test the red line, right?
Oh yeah. And it just like, I would always, as a speed skier, I'd always warm up on GS skis. Super G downhill races, I want to be on GS skis so I can make a lot of turns and just like take advantage of just maybe one warm-up run, one free ski run like Marco's talking about to get physically ready. And I felt like it just transferred so easy from a 191 to a 215, which I was skiing on for downhill back in the day, but it didn't matter. I wasn't like nervous about having to warm up on a heavy, downhill ski. I'd rather make a lot of turns. And then I was physically, amped up, ready to go.
I was the same way. I always warmed up on GS skis for that same exact reason. And because I couldn't turn the downhill skis without going 70 miles an hour. So.
That's
Hey, one thing I'll say though too, is for everybody that's listening, all these warm-up routines are different. For everybody's got a different approach. Every personality is different. You got to find what works for you, customize your own program. And, a good example is like, for me, I don't want anybody messing with me. I wanted to stay away from people in my 15-minute period of time. So I got away from people. Christian Gadina is a great example of just the polar opposite. Like that guy would be goofing around, he'd start singing like opera and, and he'd be, doing flips off of snowbanks and messing with people and poking, walk behind you and poke in the back. That's not my routine, but that was his. And that's just kind of how he released his anxiety or his tension or whatever. But, and that's going to happen. Like for me, I had to get away from that. That was distracting to me. And I needed to get away from that little mini psycho Italian guy. So I went over here and got away from it, because I didn't want to be affected by that. So, it's just different for everybody. You got to find your gig and get in your own zone.
One story about that, about people having their own routines. I remember when Kjetil Jansrud several years ago at Kitzbühel, he was like on fire. He'd won the training runs. He was the favorite for the race. And as on race day, you can watch a lot of the early racers go by standing in the start hut there on the side, the big Red Bull tent that they've built. And we were all kind of trying to watch the early guys and see what's going on with the course, and turn around and there's couches in there. And Jansrud is just taking a nap. He's asleep on the couch, whether or not he was actually asleep, but he had his hat pulled down and was just acting like he didn't even care, and that got in our heads because we're all like, this guy is so dialed in. He doesn't even care what's going on. So it's all what you're feeling on the day, and whatever you're doing, you might be like, the other racers might be watching you too. You can get in their heads a little bit.
Was that the year that Kush won his fourth race?
Jansrud actually won that year, I believe.
Oh, he did. So yeah, I mean, when you're feeling it, it's like, hey,
So that is so critical. You have your timing, you have your equipment, your body, your mind, then that last minute. I just have a story I have to share that finally proved to me that I had done enough work mentally that I could focus second to second. So I was at the start of Las Leñas. I had gotten second the day before, so I was super confident. It was a double downhill. So I'm 1 minute before the start, and I call my rep over. And because I had lost by 400 hundies the day before, I was looking for every 100th. So I had this little plastic thing on my boot that I said, hey, can you cut that off? So my rep, with 1 minute to go, because the starter's like, Nummer 21, eine Minute, or whatever. So he gets this big knife. I pull up my suit. He goes to cut off this plastic heater piece, and he slices his finger from the knuckle down to the tip, down to the bone, and starts spurting blood. So his eyes go up in the back of his head, and he passes out. Like, I thought my rep was dead. I'm like, Doc, I'm yelling because my rep just passed out. And then the starter goes, 30 sekunde. So I got like 30 seconds to go, and there's commotion and chaos. The doctor's there. My rep's dead, I thought. And I physically moved from my rep to the start, but mentally I left my rep and I got in the start, and I was able to do my breathing, my cue words, a couple cue words that, be aggressive, and do stare at that first gate, and 10 seconds. And I went, and I was totally into the zone, had a great top 15 race. I didn't win, but I had a good race. But I remember coming through the finish, and my rep popped back into my mind. Oh my God, he's dead. So I skied over to the radio. He had just passed out. It was 12,000 feet. He didn't like blood. He was fine. But that day proved, after all the training I've done mentally to be focused, I found that I could focus within 3 to 5 seconds of chaos. So it's just a story that proved to me that it does pay off. Focusing and those start routines are a skill that you should practice and practice and practice.
Yeah, I think it's the greatest thing that you can escape and be free, you know, and you have to be really focused when you're going fast. And it's a nice, you know, way to kind of just tap into this like other dimension in a way when you're ski racing.
And always carry a first aid kit.
Good thing you didn't pass out in the start, Louis.
No. I've passed out because I've almost been nervous, but no blood. Any other crazy start stories?
I remember one year in Val Gardena, my tech had made a last minute ski change, and he goes to put me in the skis 2 racers out, and I didn't fit in the bindings. Like they were way too small because I'd shared a tech with Travis Ganong, who has a 1 size smaller boot, and he'd been skied on the day before. And my tech, Graggy, just started going crazy with his posi drive. Unscrew the binding fully off the ski. I'm like a minute and a half out. Luckily, the atomic system kind of, at that time, you could slide him in and out, but he got it changed out. And it was one of those times where I just had to go to a different place in my mind and be like, all right, he's dealing with that. And with like 30 seconds, clicks me in the skis, tap the poles. I was out of there. It worked, but it was the same thing. I went through the finish and I was like, oh my God, that was a little bit crazy.
That was like an F1 pit stop for you, huh? You just let your crew take care of that, and you know, in your place. I'll finish up with one too. And I had a big crash in Adelboden. I'm sure a lot of people have seen that. It took me out of racing Wengen. I was working my way back, and I was in a Super G for Kitzbühel. I still couldn't inspect by putting full weight on my leg, and so I was just like inspecting pretty much on my left leg the whole way down. Just touching my right was not where I wanted to be physically, and came to the start. I was committed, and I'm getting into my skis, and Bergler says like, how's your leg feeling? I'm just shaking my head like, dude, it's race time, you know? And I make legs fine, time to race. Like, why would you ask something like that? It was like what I was thinking, but I went out there and still, you know, was able to block that out. And actually I lost the race by 0.02 of a second to Herman Meyer. But it just shows like, hey, even physically, you can like muster up enough strength and just, you know, put something out of your mind. Either your tech slices his finger, bindings aren't adjusted, or you're not feeling 100%. And it's like, I was just thinking, you know, I got like a minute and a half, minute 40 to go all out. Like, I've been training for this. I can do this. Like, this is not going to, you know, stop me. So power of the mind goes a long ways.
Let's switch directions to training runs. Training runs, they can mean the world. They can mean nothing. Darren, which was your approach to training runs for World Cup Downhill?
Training runs, well, I mean, I looked at it as like, we're training all year long. We have a couple shots, maybe just one training run in a race. These tracks are insane. They're so much fun to ski. So I was like, I want to, you know, get the most out of these. For the most part, I would be pushing. You know, there's some spots where I'd try and relax a little bit, maybe, you know, not fight for like crazy aerodynamics, like on flats, something like that. But in the turns and more aggressive sections where line to me was going to be my advantage, I would either, you know, have a plan with the coaches. I may either go for this like really direct, like fast line, or maybe I'll just ski a more rounder line so we don't give up our you know, optimal race line to everybody else that are watching, but ski it hard. But I want to come down feeling like I left everything on the hill in training and in certain sections, because I want to be at that really high intensity level when it came to the race. And I was confident myself in my training where I could blow myself out in a run at Bormio, recover, focused a lot on recovery, get on the bike as soon as I could, hydrating, you know, propping the legs up, doing electric stim, all that stuff, you know, and fully recovering as fast as I could. So I was ready for the next day. But it was, yeah, I think saving a few lines where you don't want to give up at your fastest, you know, race line, but also just skiing it hard. And it was fun. Like, I want to come down having a good time, and I didn't want to give up the chance of of like laying in line and going huge off of some jumps and feeling these fast turns just for one run, one crack at it.
I think I treated training runs more as a learning run. I was never really I was kind of notorious for not being that fast in training. I had the confidence that I could usually pull it out on race day and be better. So it wasn't important to me to try to be fast on those days. It was more about getting on the track, feeling the snow, feeling the speed, the air, see if it correlated with what you thought it was going to be in your inspection, and just really learning the track so that you had a great feel of it for the race day when you're going full punch. And if we had more than one training run, then the intensity would ramp up from day to day. But the first one, I was always kind of slow, kind of checking it out. Several times actually like missing gates and just having the mental confidence to be like, okay, it's training, doesn't matter, and moving on, but keeping all that stuff in the bank for when it really counted on the race day.
Before AJ, you comment, I wanted to just throw this out. When I raced, we had at least 4 training runs scheduled, like 3 to 4, always. AJ, you were around at the end of my career, and then you transitioned into this later career where they might have scheduled only 1 or 2. How did you like the amount of training runs, and did you ever skip a training run if there were too many?
Yeah, so that's a great point. I mean, and in today's, junior racing and early FIS, they try to, schedule a few, but for us, I remember that, Louis, when it was like 3 days of training was standard at the World Cup level in the late 80s, early 90s, but then it compressed. And I mean, there were times when they would schedule 3, but then they'd cancel 1 on purpose. But more than likely it was they'd schedule 3 and weather or, track conditions or whatever wouldn't permit more than maybe 1 sometimes. And so there was I remember a lot of the time in my career in the, early to mid 90s where we were only getting 1 training run before the race. And part of that was, there were a lot of years where there wasn't a lot of snow in Europe, especially in January. But, so my approach always in training was that sort of pull the string approach, right? I wanted to have my training run, or if I had 2, to, be a little bit of a rounder line so that on race day I could pull the string a little bit and tighten things up where I knew I could. Sometimes, the line I chose in training was right in a section, and sometimes I could tighten it a little bit. But I really like to, I always treated training as like a 90% run, and it wasn't necessarily 90% intensity, but it was not sort of 90% of, do I want to win this run? And so I backed off a little bit with my line, or maybe I backed off a little bit with, racing to the finish line. I'd stand up a gate or 2 early or something like that, just to always save a little bit for race day. And I felt like that was an approach that worked for me personally, because like your question, my best run on average was my second run. And if I ever did get 2 training runs in a race run, I felt like I might have squeaked out another good run on the 3rd run. But, and sometimes I'd have a good run on 3rd run, but, more than not, my best run was my second run. And to answer your other question about skipping a run, absolutely, man. Bormio, I skipped a second training run a lot. Wengen, I skipped a training run a lot. Why? Well, because saving some legs, like those 2 courses took so much out of you that I love the opportunity to get out there and inspect and do everything, but not, go to maximum intensity the day before a race. So, yeah, I mean,
giving up some good runs, man.
Yeah, I know, but I needed to save it. I just felt like it was important to save it. And, but anyway, yeah, my approach for training was training, winning a training run might build a little bit of confidence, but it's certainly, like you said earlier, Louis, it doesn't give you any trophies.
I'm going to throw this one to all of you, but mostly Marco and Darren, if you were still racing. Bodie at Kitzbühel. You come in into the style hung, you have that big carousel. There was that year he dove in. He took a completely different line. He won both training runs, and then everybody started copying it.
If you go in there more direct and you're cutting off a lot of line, it's a huge benefit. And that was kind of our line that we chose. And Bodie went there really direct and just like cut a bunch of line and smoked all those guys there. And yeah, he won that training run, but he gave it up for race day. And like Hannes Reichelt, I think, was the guy that won that year. He did the same exact line that Bodie did, and it made the difference to keep, him ahead on that. But that was a big balancing act of how far you want to try and push yourself and show your best lines.
What you were talking about at Kitzbühel, going in straight and then whipping off a tiny turn up there. Like, I didn't really have that skill, so I was looking at more maybe coming in high and being super clean and carrying speed out and then making time up later. And on that, lots of other courses too, it's like you kind of pinpoint the spots where you can be really fast and play into that. Even if your competitors are showing something totally different, you got to unless you're totally off the mark, you got to like keep it between the lines and do what you can do to the best of your ability, and it usually works out pretty well.
I like that. Play to your strengths and never forget that you are unique and have your own strengths. Training runs, I just want to kind of take a right turn on training runs. Training runs can also be a little crazy. I remember back in St. Anton, we went up for the training run. It was blistery, it was snowy, it was freezing, it was unsafe. And this is back in the 80s. They said, we're going to just run you with your clothes on, put your bib outside of your clothes. We're going to run you every 30 seconds just to get you off the hill safely. Well, that turned into a nightmare. Austrians would go out of the start and just wait at the bottom of the start until 4 of the Austrians got together, and then they'd ski across the entire thing and then, hit the crazy kangaroo jump at the end. And so we started that. I went down with Phil Mayer and we just kind of drafted each other. It was absolute craziness, danger. It would never happen today, but that's what it was like in the 80s when they tried to just make bad decisions. Any other training run stories for you guys that were just kind of off the wall?
We did that same thing at Val d'Isere one year, and I don't know if it was the last year they did it, because I agree that I would never see that today, but it was in 94, I think, and we had a ton of snow. And so they just sent everybody to ski the track in, right, instead of running a cat over it. And yeah, we were just rapid fire. And I think I got 3 runs. They let us come back up and do multiple runs. I got like 3 runs that day, and it was pretty slow. We had to have clothes on, but it was really fun. But I agree. They wouldn't do that nowadays. No way.
Yeah, that ship has sailed. You guys.
Yeah.
That's what Marco and I do on the every day anyways, how we ski, clothes on, going fast on the mountain, treating the mountain like a downhill track. And I think that's important, too, like we're talking about speed and getting kids just more comfortable at speed. Like when conditions allow, it's a safe environment, you're strong, confident in yourself, go fast, like especially on flats or tuck it out. There's a lot of like little terrain side hills, like grab your tuck and just work the terrain and feel comfortable holding that like bully, and letting your legs move. And you have to always try and get speed elements in the course on a race hill, do it free skiing. And when it's rough and bumpy, like get comfortable, like having that like just strong core and leg separation, so your legs can move like suspension. And I think that's like a huge benefit.
Goes right to a question from Mark Wolcott. So if you have any listeners have a question, just info@americandownhiller.com, send it to us. But this comes from Mark Wolcott, and I'll throw it out there. Darren, you kind of already touched on it. How can we as a nation get more speed training for the U10, U12, U14s so they're comfortable at speed, they're used to it, so when they make that jump to Super G and downhill, they already have the skills developed to take even further? I'm just going to throw that out there. AJ, how about you?
Well, yeah, since you're throwing it to me, I'll follow what Darren just said. I mean, I take my son to the AD camp every year. It's the best place to get speed training. I mean, it's full length downhill at Mammoth, big jump off a hair jump, lots of speed, lots of length, lots of reps, terrain, the wave track. It's a great camp. If there's any race organizers or divisional board members listening to these podcasts, getting young kids going fast is what's important early on. We don't need to set gates. If you already got a closed race venue with nets on both sides, you've already got closure at the top, closure at the bottom. You've already got coaches there with radios. Just set up a high-speed free ski venue one day, get the kids up there in their bib number or even in random order, but send them out of the start every 15 seconds, one at a time. You got, midpoint checks and making sure that, nobody's crashing or having any problems, but getting these kids going fast is what's important. Helmets on, long skis if they've got them, learn to tuck, just having an open, safe venue that doesn't have any, crazy terrain, gates, any obstacles on it. Just let's get these kids skiing fast. I mean, this can be an afternoon thing or, one day of a race series someplace, but just closed venue fast skiing is a really great way to get young kids learning how to go fast.
Yeah, I'll set Marco up. Talk about the American Downhillers Camp. What are the skills mentally and what are the skills technically that you want to build and what you're focused on, Marco?
I feel like speed training has this stigma that it's dangerous and it's expensive and, to get this huge venue blocked off. But we've learned at the AD camp, it's like, you don't need a whole lot to actually train speed. It's a natural rollover, maybe some natural whoops or just an open run where you can go fast. If you can control that environment with some eyes on the hill and have the kids being comfortable doing these small movements, it all builds up into, having some real skills for aerodynamics and jumping and tactics and speed, those are our three focuses at camp. You want to have good tactics because when it comes to speed, you're looking for the smoothest, fastest line, which is not necessarily gate to gate. You're looking down the hill and it's a little bit different in the tech events. You want to be aerodynamic, good position, which is fairly basic, but all of us at our level have been in wind tunnels and seen how the air moves over your body. And so we can, teach the proper shape of your tuck and whatnot. And then jumping is the one thing that I feel like kids are generally pretty scared of if they don't have experience, but just starting off with the proper movements over the tiny jumps and just it builds bigger and bigger. And it's really the same movements that you're doing off a 2-foot jump that you did over the camel jumps when you first popped them, Lou. It's fairly basic. So it's building that mental confidence and being comfortable going fast. Like AJ said, I think if you are comfortable going fast when you're a kid, that never goes away. And if you're not comfortable going fast as you move into your later teenage years, like that can be a problem. So just go fast when you're young and it'll pay off.
It's building into it. We do a great job of like having that controlled environment, eyes on the course, good communication radios, and say the hair jump. I mean, we're starting slow, not too far up the hill. You get the movements right. And I think that's something that Marco really drives home hard to all the coaches. And we try to implement, number one, safety and speed with a wave track. We kind of start slow, but by third or fourth day, these kids are firing off the jump through the wave track and just feeling comfortable. We're not throwing these guys in there like say just like go all out first run. There's some we got to hold back, some that are a little tentative, but we can still show what to do, which is kind of cool. By example, or we have some current US ski team guys that come out and do it as well. But it's a building process. I think it's like that's number one. We want to see all these kids be safe, but come out feeling really confident in themselves and throwing down at the end of the camp.
Awesome. And more information about the American Downhillers Camp, where do they go? Yeah,
so AmericanDownhiller.com. The camp's not open for registration yet, but there's some information there on the dates. It's the week before Memorial Day. And you can if you are interested in the camp, you can put your name in on our site to get more information about it. And registration will open up next month in February.
All right, our last question before we end is from Robert Auchi. If I said your name wrong, I'm sorry. He says, I've been to Beaver Creek, but if I was able to attend a European race, which one would you recommend? I'm going to throw it out there. Which race would you recommend him to go visit in Europe?
Anything. They're all great for a different reason, right? They're all great and they're all challenging in one way or another, and they're all fun. And I would try to go to all of them.
Go to Norway. that's something, you know, that's pretty cool. I mean, that's one of my favorite places. Obviously, like you can hear about Bengen and Kitzbühel is the huge turnouts and big hype. And obviously like the experiences there are just unmatched, but you know, even like Norway going there, there's good skiing, score a room up on the mountain, like all the athletes, it's like way more intimate and just like it's a really rad hill. And it's just a different experience. So Kitzbühel, Norway, it's a good spot too, but I'd say everyone as well, like AJ just mentioned.
Yeah, one of the more obscure ones, you know, like a Valgardena or Garmisch or Norway. You can probably have a little more access with being right on the course, closer to the athletes. Like the guys are saying, you go to a Wengen or a Kitzbühel, and it's a great time, but it's crazy, and you're going to be in the droves of fans for sure.
Yeah, if you want to party, Wengen, Kitzbühel.
Look these guys up. They'll take you to a great trip right here, ADL Ski Club. They're great supporters of the American Downhiller Camp as well. So these guys do trips every year.
I echo everyone. Any race in Europe is going to be fantastic. If you want the crowd's excitement, go to Wengen Kitzbühel. If you want more intimate, try to Bormio, Val Gardena, St. Anton, whatever. All right. Thanks to AJ, Marco, and D Money. Thanks for watching and listening to our American Downhiller podcast. If you like it, spread the word, share with your friends, coaches, teammates throughout your ski club. You can find us on skiracing.com for our video version, and now on audio form, either Spotify or Apple, and just search American Downhiller Podcast. It also helps a ton if you subscribe and also give us a rating. We are now the 55th largest podcast in Switzerland. I just got a notice on that. That's very random. Let's make it the first in the world. Hey, looking forward, our next podcast coming up is about Wengen. That's next week. The longest downhill track in the world that at times runs about 2 minutes and 30 seconds on a snowy training run. I've been 2:45 with some of the craziest terrain in the final 10 seconds. That is the definition of a leg burner. Hey, Darren Rolfs has won Wengen. You've been on the podium, Marco, AJ, and I. We have some special memories. You don't want to miss that one. Thanks, and always remember, ski fast, take chances.